All right, here with Igor of Igor MMA. Now, you've been in this game a very, very long time.
Very long time, yeah.
Very long time. Out of curiosity, you've obviously been in it so long, you've seen how this sport has evolved over time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah?
100%.
And the reason why I say that, I think I competed against one of your boys back when Luke Pizzuti was doing the New South Wales AMMA.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and I think, and what happened in that fight, so I had no ground game back then. I had zero, right? Let's be real. Like I did karate as a kid, I did kung fu at the time. I had zero ground game. The striking was okay, like I didn't have any problems in the striking, but as soon as your boy realized that I had no ground game, I went to the mat and he just kept me there and I lost because of that. So, and that's good learning for people too, right? Don't sleep on any part of the sport. But I guess from your perspective as a coach, like how have you seen this game evolve over these years?
Well, I literally started the club almost 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I came from Japan, so I lived 3 years in Japan, and before that everywhere in Europe and the US, and long story short, but once I got here, it's hard to think of it now, but there were hardly 3 jiu-jitsu clubs in Sydney.
Yeah.
And maybe another 2 MMA clubs. And they were not comparable to any of the jiu-jitsu clubs or MMA clubs today.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very much the beginning of everything in Sydney.
Yeah.
And to be there, from the very beginning and see how everything was evolving. And to, be here now still and have a look. In Sydney, you probably easily have over 300 registered jiu-jitsu gyms.
Yeah.
Who knows how many on the side.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you probably easily have 25 really big, strong MMA clubs. And then again, who knows how many smaller ones on the side.
Yeah.
So that shows that in less than 20 years, we pretty much went from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
And probably a good decade ago, I said that Australia's time is coming, and then we'll see a lot of UFC guys come out of Australia.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened. Like, most signings came out of Sydney in the last decade.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a couple over in Victoria and maybe, 1 or 2 in Queensland. But the majority of people that got signed to the UFC came out of Sydney.
Yeah.
And it showed, because it said that the level really went up in Sydney.
Yeah.
And it went up in jiu-jitsu, and it went up in striking, and Thai boxing, and boxing.
Yep.
And it's showing boxing is having a boom at the moment again.
Absolutely.
And it's showing in wrestling as well. Wrestling is again up and coming.
Yeah.
And it went to boxing and wrestling, and probably even a little bit of Thai boxing. It went to quite a lull over the last decade.
Yeah.
But we're seeing it just kind of started, I think, before COVID again.
Yeah.
And it kind of stayed through COVID. It's like even that nobody was allowed to do anything, I think that energy was there.
There. Yeah.
And because the energy was there, is the moment, everything started and everything was up and running. And we saw, all the shows come up. Everybody was kind of training and waiting to just start fighting again, right?
The shows are crazy because literally it was like when COVID ended, I know where I train my kickboxing, it was like, oh, we'll see what happens because we don't know like if the show's going to get postponed or cancelled or whatever. And then like when the first couple of shows happened and they went through no hitches, and then it was like suddenly, boom, every weekend there's a show. And like not just, Sydney, but like obviously, all the other states, they all jumped onto it. They're all,
I think a lot of people have been training.
Yeah.
And because they've been training, as said, the level was up.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't fight.
Yeah.
So all they could do is just focus on training.
Yeah.
And the moment you just focus on training and you start drilling and, you start exchanging ideas with the people that are available, well, that lifts the level of everybody.
Absolutely.
And then the moment you can then compete and go and try out these things, and not just that, but compete regularly, because there is now so many shows, it instantly lifts the level.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what was probably lacking, not just in Sydney, but in general in Australia, because
the competition wasn't there.
Yeah, the quality of players is very good here. The problem is they don't get enough competition.
Yeah.
And that's where we usually fall behind internationally, because we don't get enough competition.
Yeah.
And competition is not going to other gyms and trying to fight on the mat.
No.
Competition is
It's
competition.
proper competition,
You have to
You
go.
need the lights. You need the
lights,
atmosphere.
You need the pressure. You need the people. You need the fans. You need to be under the pressure. You need to do your weight cuts. You need to, and so you need to experience all that and then still perform.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then obviously that lifts you as well as a player.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just from a technical aspect, but an overall aspect as an athlete.
Yeah.
Because now you're doing everything that an athlete has to do way before they're fighting.
Yeah.
And just being comfortable with that makes you better.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things, I did a podcast with Liam recently from VT1, and my comment to him was like, the amateur level now in Sydney anyway is like so high. It's almost like a professional level, right?
I've been saying that for years.
Yeah, you've been saying that for
So
years?
to my guys, I pretty much say that because of various things, and this is not to blame anybody. It's just it is the way it is, right?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty happy that it's even what it is.
Yep.
To be honest.
Yeah.
Can it be better? Yeah, it always can be better, right? But if you're not the promoter yourself, if you're not putting a show up, if you're not, then you're not dealing with the difficulties they're dealing with.
Yeah.
So you just got to be happy that people are putting up shows.
Yeah.
That said, though, as we are moving forward, I think a lot of these promoters will jump on board to try and improve things in sense of that we do end up with a clear distinction between amateur and professional.
Yep.
At the moment, to be honest, I watch some of my guys and some of the other guys fighting regular on these shows.
Yeah.
And if you didn't know it's a 3-minute fight,
Yep.
if somebody just told you, hey, this is a 5-minute fight,
Yep.
you wouldn't think no different.
No, yeah.
They're wearing the little gloves.
Yep.
They are the 4-ounce gloves.
Yep.
They're not wearing the
No
6
shin guards,
ounce.
yeah,
There's no
that's
shin
right.
guards. There's no headgear. And there's very little restriction
Yep.
in what they can and cannot do.
Yep.
So it's pretty much
Yeah.
pro.
Yeah.
And the way they're training and the way they're grappling and the level of and the amount of power
Yep.
and athleticism, it just demonstrates that they could easily just be fighting pro. So
Yep.
to a lot of my guys, I always say these days, I'm not interested in you getting an amateur title. I'm interested in seeing if you can perform in a few amateur fights,
Yep.
and then let's not waste time. Let's
Yeah,
just turn
let's get
pro.
straight into it, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And you could be spending another year getting another 5 amateur fights, or
Yep.
you could be spending that same year getting another 4 or 5
Pro
pro
fights.
fights.
Yep.
And that brings you closer to where you want to go.
Exactly.
That said, you can get your experience
Yep.
by other means,
Yeah.
not necessarily just through your amateur fights. You can get your experience via going and competing in wrestling and
Yep.
competing in Thai boxing and
Yeah.
competing in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And so you can get your experience.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely.
not the problem. As long as you put the work in and you go
Yeah.
and get the experience.
Yeah.
Just because you don't have 30, 40 amateur fights
Yeah.
doesn't mean you won't be the level of somebody
No,
who's a
of course not.
professional. And I think that's very much where we are today.
Yeah.
And even jiu-jitsu, like I just went to the Pen Packs to Melbourne. I was just
Yep.
watching the blue belt, purple belt division there.
The level's gone so
Crazy.
high now.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. It's crazy. It's like incomparable.
Yeah, I think what we're missing and part of what I'm trying to do in the Sydney scene is we're missing the promotion of these guys when they're at this level, because I think it's the only thing that's missing is the platform, right? Like when I say the platform, if these guys have that ability to draw a crowd, well, that's the only difference between a pro and an amateur, right?
Yeah.
When I say as long as the skill is there, right? Like if you don't have the skill, like there's no point talking. But if you've got the skill, then the only thing missing, like some of your guys, I know obviously Perry, I know Joseph is fighting tonight. You've obviously got Josh, you've got Dylan Thompson. These guys that had stellar performances at the last Silverback show, right? The only thing that's missing is that sort of like that little bit of that star power, that awareness, right? And I feel like.
I think, sorry to interrupt you there, but I totally agree with you. At the end of the day, it's like you have to put bums on seats. If you put bums on seats, then the promoters are happy.
Yeah, that's
if
it.
they're happy, they'll put
That's
on
it.
bigger shows. If they put on bigger shows, you actually get paid for what you're doing.
That's right.
It's like it's business 101.
Yeah.
But that said, pretty much like what you're doing,
Yeah.
trying to shine light on all of it,
Yeah.
that's great. But what really needed, and like a lot more of it, is it always starts with the community. It's very hard to attract, like if you have a great guy, or let's say where we're at in Bondi Junction, somebody in Queensland doesn't care.
Yeah.
Not just yet, anyhow.
Yeah.
And they will need to see a highlight reel of him knocking out people in
Yeah.
3-4 different fights before they even think of, this is maybe somebody
follow
I should
this guy.
follow.
Yeah.
So we're first always talking about community. And so the community is the one that comes to these shows, and the community is the one that supports. But what really needs to happen is there needs to be more of that.
Yeah.
It's not that it's not enough,
Yeah.
but it's not enough.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I agree with you 100%.
So your local community they all have to jump on board. They all
Yeah.
have to, because at the end of the day, these fighters are basically startup businesses. That's what they
Yeah,
are, right?
that's right.
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
they're startup businesses, and every local guy needs to support them and needs to be behind them, and there needs to be more. These guys are not making money,
Yeah.
and because they're not making money, that's why they're not going as fast as they possibly could be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because obviously they have to go to work and they have
Yeah.
to pay the bills and they can't train as a full-time athlete.
Yeah.
The only way to change all that is to have various avenues that support them, not just via sponsorship, but let's say via merchandise,
Yep.
via sponsorship,
Yep.
via seminars,
Yep.
via So there's like all these different avenues that we could be doing for them, and organizing for them, to give them, I said, that financial foundation so they can take the year out, because it's pretty much for most of these amateurs, they're of that level, that's pretty much what it takes. If they can take a year out where they're not working and just going from amateur to a professional athlete, training 2-3 times a day, eating, sleeping, doing nothing else, and just fighting every couple of weeks, within a year they're on a big show.
No, absolutely. Look,
but the majority of them, not everybody, but a lot of them.
The guys who have, you need to have some talent, you need to have the work ethic, right? The discipline, right? So I think this deserves a longer conversation. So I'm going to invite you onto the podcast, right in this interview here, and we're going to catch up and let people hear more about, your thoughts and share your story as well, because I think that's really, really important. And at the end of the day, Igor's made a great point about, the community needs to get behind these athletes. Like, why I love attending these shows is because I know that I'm seeing a future star in the making. It may not be every person on the card, but there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 of these people on this card that will one day, you'll go, shit, where did this guy come from, right?
But instead of just 1 or 2, it could literally be 5 or 10.
Yeah, it could be.
The difference is literally their ability to support themselves while they're going from being an amateur athlete to be a professional athlete.
That's it.
For most of them, that's the case.
Yeah.
And because we have so many big shows now, not just the UFC, but there's Bellator and ONE FC and like, Eagle FC now with Khabib, right?
That's right.
There's so many of these shows now that are actually paying fighters. There's a huge chance of some of them ending up on any of these other shows. If they're not making the UFC roster, they'll be easily making some of the other rosters. And then there's enough money there for them to live off being a professional fighter.
It's almost like in the old days, right? It used to be very much style versus style, right? And like when our sport started to flourish is when we let go of the worry about style versus style and we started to go, what can we actually do with this, right? I sort of feel like that, our Sydney MMA scene is a bit like that as well. Like I feel like we need to not be thinking that we're competing in the one small fish pond. We need to be thinking bigger. As the level increases, everybody's level increases, right? It doesn't matter which team you're with, but if you're getting good training and you're fighting competitively and you have these matches and you get to compete against these other guys, that iron is sharpening the iron every single time, right? And so, I'd love to see our scene, really flourish and see more of our athletes make it to these mainstream promotions. So we'll have to catch up and do a podcast, definitely. Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, good luck to you boys tonight.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
All right. My pleasure.
Thank you.